The Scottish borders are shaped by quiet towns, ruined abbeys, and empty hills. Yet beneath this calm, older stories linger waiting to be remembered. Here are 9 haunted places. Jedburgh Castle, Jail and Museum. Rising above the town of Jedburgh, the grim outline of Jedburgh Castle Jail dominates the landscape, its stone walls heavy with authority and restraint. Built in the early 19th century as a prison rather than a residence, the structure was designed to contain rather than comfort. It is perhaps this purpose that has shaped the uneasy reputation it carries today. Over the years, numerous apparitions have been associated with the building, making it one of the most active locations in the borders. Among the most striking is the figure of a piper said to appear on the battlements. Witnesses describe hearing the faint sound of pipes carried on the wind, followed by the brief sight of a solitary figure silhouetted against the sky, standing where no one should be. Inside the jail, reports become more frequent and varied. Visitors and staff have spoken of unexplained lights moving through corridors and cells, appearing briefly before vanishing. Footsteps are often heard pacing along upper levels, their rhythms steady and deliberate, even when the building is known to be empty. More unsettling are accounts of breathing and whistling heard close by, sometimes just behind a listener's shoulder. These sounds are described as intimate rather than distant, prompting sudden awareness of personal space being breached. Cell doors are also said to open and close on their own, the heavy metal mechanisms moving slowly, accompanied by the echoing clang that once marked confinement and punishment. Other phenomena include the appearance of smoke or mist forming briefly within cells or passageways despite no obvious source. These moments are often accompanied by sudden drops in temperature, leaving witnesses uncertain whether what they have experienced was physical or imagined. Skeptics point out that the jail's age structure and exposed position make it susceptible to drafts, shifting light, and sound distortion. Old stone buildings, particularly those designed for security, can amplify the smallest changes in environment. These explanations are reasonable, and the museum itself presents the site primarily as a place of history rather than mystery. Yet many who pass through Jedburgh Castle Jail remark on a persistent sense of presence. The feeling is not overtly threatening, but watchful, as though the building remembers its former occupants and the lives constrained within its walls. Today, the jail stands, preserved, its cells open to the public, its past carefully documented. But when the wind rises around the battlements and the corridors fall quiet, some believe the prison still holds more than exhibits. And as we leave Jedburgh behind, our journey continues deeper into the borders toward a grand house where a grieving figure is said to wander in search of what was lost. Schloss Roxburghe Hotel. Set within rolling parkland near the River Tweed, the Schloss Roxburghe Hotel presents itself as a place of refinement and quiet luxury. Its long history, however, stretches far beyond its modern role, and it is within this layered past that a number of unsettling stories continue to circulate. The most frequently reported presence within the building is known as the Green Lady. She is said to appear on the ground floor, most often near the kitchen and inner hall, before moving slowly toward the conservatory. Witnesses describe her as a female figure, dressed in green, her movements deliberate and unhurried, as though following a familiar routine. According to local tradition, the Green Lady is searching for her baby. Those who claim to have encountered her often speak of a strong emotional weight accompanying the sighting. The air feels heavy. Sound seems muted. Some report an instinctive sense of sadness, rather than fear, as though they have intruded upon a private and ongoing grief. Another apparition associated with the hotel is that of a soldier, most often seen on the top floor in what is now used as a storage area. The figure is described as male, dressed in military clothing from an earlier period. His presence is brief, usually noticed at the edge of vision, and vanishes when approached. Speculation suggests he may have been a prisoner during wartime or a member of the family who once served in the armed forces, though no definitive record confirms this. Guests have also reported more subtle experiences. One described the sensation of something cool brushing down her body as though a hand or presence passed close by without making contact. Others speak of sudden drops in temperature confined to specific rooms or the feeling of being observed while alone. There are also stories linked to the hotel's administration building, which some believe carries its own share of unexplained activity. Footsteps have been heard where no one is present, and lights are said to behave unpredictably, though these reports remain anecdotal. Skeptical explanations are readily offered. Large, historic buildings settle. Air circulates unevenly. Expectation influences perception, particularly in places with strong reputations. These explanations are sensible, and the hotel itself does not promote its ghostly associations. Yet many who stay at Schloss Roxburghe remark on a distinctive atmosphere, particularly at night when the corridors grow quiet and the grounds fall dark. The feeling is not threatening, but attentive, as though something remains awake long after the guests have retired. The hotel continues to welcome visitors seeking peace and comfort. But beneath its polished surfaces and careful restoration, some believe older stories still move quietly through its halls. And as we leave this place of elegance and lingering sorrow behind, we travel onward to ruins where voices are said to rise not in grief, but in prayer that never fully faded. Dryburgh Abbey, set beside a bend in the River Tweed, Dryburgh Abbey lies in partial ruin, its broken arches open to sky and wind. Founded in the 12th century, the abbey was once a place of prayer, routine, and quiet devotion. Today, what remains is stone and silence, though some believe that silence is not as complete as it appears. Visitors to Dryburgh Abbey have long spoken of sounds that seem to rise from the ruins themselves. Chanting low and rhythmic has been heard drifting through the open spaces, particularly in the early evening or during moments of stillness. The voices are described as indistinct, never forming clear words, yet unmistakably human in tone. Those who hear them often stop walking, without realizing why, as though instinctively responding to something familiar. Alongside these sounds, sightings of ghostly monks have been reported moving among the remains of the cloister and chapter house. The figures are usually described as robed and hooded, their forms pale against the stone. They do not rush or react to being seen. Instead, they move slowly, following paths that once defined daily life within the abbey paths, now marked only by grass and shadow. What unsettles many witnesses is the sense of order attached to these appearances. The chanting does not feel chaotic or mournful. The figures do not wander aimlessly. Everything seems structured, purposeful, as though the abbey still follows a timetable long forgotten by the living. Skeptics point out that the ruins are exposed to wind, which can carry sound from distant sources and shape it into something unfamiliar. Birds' water and rustling foliage can combine to create patterns that resemble human voices. These explanations are reasonable, particularly in an open environment shaped by centuries of erosion. Yet even those unfamiliar with the stories often remark on the atmosphere at Dryburgh. The air feels dense, as though holding memory rather than emptiness. Some describe a pressure in the chest, others an urge to lower their voice or move more slowly without any clear reason. Unlike many haunted locations, Dryburgh Abbey carries no tales of violence or unrest. There are no reports of sudden movement or physical disturbance. Instead, the unease lies in continuity, the sense that something never fully stopped here but simply continued beyond visibility. Dryburgh Abbey remains open, its ruins preserved as a place of history and reflection. By day, visitors wander freely, reading plaques and admiring the setting. But when the light fades and the river quiets, some believe the abbey resumes an older purpose. And as we leave Dryburgh behind, carrying the echo of voices that may never have fallen silent, we move onward toward a house where history walks, not in prayer, but in royal memory. Traquair House, nestled among wooded hills near Innerleithen. Traquair House is recognized as the oldest continually inhabited house in Scotland. Its long drive, ancient walls, and quiet grounds suggest stability and endurance. Yet history here is not confined to records alone. According to local tradition, some of its most famous visitors never truly departed. One of the most enduring apparitions associated with Traquair House is that of Bonnie Prince Charlie. During the Jacobite Rising of the 18th century, the prince is known to have visited the house, and legend claims his spirit still walks the avenue that once led to the original entrance. Witnesses describe a solitary male figure moving steadily along the drive, dressed in period clothing, his presence brief but unmistakable. Those who report seeing him often remark on a feeling of distance, as though the figure is not aware of the present at all. He does not acknowledge observers, nor does he deviate from his path. Instead, he appears bound to a moment of expectation and ambition, replayed endlessly against the backdrop of the house that once welcomed him. Another presence linked to Traquair is Lady Louise Stuart, who died in the late 19th century and was the wife of the last Earl to reside at the house. She has been reported in the grounds, often near quieter corners of the estate. Her appearance is described as calm and dignified, more reflective than restless. Some witnesses speak of a gentle shift in atmosphere when she is seen, as though the land itself recognizes her return. The house's interior is rarely associated with dramatic disturbance. Instead, visitors mention subtle changes, a sudden stillness in rooms normally alive with echo, the sense of being watched without threat. Footsteps heard softly on gravel paths outside when no one is visible. Skeptics point to Traquair's deep historical associations. Expectation can shape perception, particularly in places tied to national identity and long memory. Old houses also respond audibly to changes in temperature and pressure, creating sounds that invite interpretation. These explanations are reasonable and often sufficient. Yet even those unconvinced by the stories admit that Traquair House carries a presence that feels unusually composed. The atmosphere is not one of fear, but of endurance, as though the past has settled rather than faded. Today, Traquair House remains carefully preserved, its history openly celebrated. Visitors walk the grounds freely, often unaware of the legends attached to them. But when the light softens and the avenue grows quiet, some believe a former prince still walks there, retracing a path shaped by hope and loss. And as we leave Traquair behind, our journey takes us onward to a modest village inn, where the presence is said to dwell not in grandeur, but beneath the ground itself. Old Crosskeys in Denholm. Standing on the main street of Denholm, the Old Crosskeys Inn appears much like any traditional Borders public house. Its stone exterior, low beams, and long history suggest warmth and familiarity rather than unease. Yet beneath the inn, in cellars rarely seen by guests, a quieter and far more unsettling story is said to persist. The presence, most often associated with the Old Crosskeys, is known simply as Harry. Little is recorded about who Harry may have been in life, and that uncertainty has only deepened the unease surrounding his reputation. What is consistent across accounts is where he is encountered. Almost all reports place him firmly below ground in the dark and confined spaces of the cellar. Staff members over the years have spoken of footsteps heard, moving deliberately beneath the floor, slow and measured, as though someone were pacing the narrow passages. When investigated, the cellars are found empty. The air, however, is often described as noticeably colder, carrying a heaviness that lingers long after leaving the space. Some witnesses report the sensation of being watched while descending the cellar steps, a feeling strong enough to cause hesitation halfway down. Others describe sudden movements at the edge of vision, a shape withdrawing behind stacked barrels or stone supports, always just out of clear sight. Harry is not described as violent or aggressive. There are no reports of objects thrown or doors forced open. Instead, his presence is marked by persistence, a sense of occupation, rather than intrusion. Those who encounter him often say it feels as though they have entered someone else's territory rather than being confronted directly. Skeptics offer practical explanations. Cellars amplify sound. Temperature differences create sudden chills. Old stone buildings settle and shift, producing movement that invites interpretation. These explanations are sensible, particularly in a structure that has stood for centuries. Yet even those who dismiss the idea of a ghost admit that the cellars of the old cross keys feel distinctly uncomfortable. The atmosphere changes sharply from the warmth above. Silence feels deliberate rather than empty. Time seems to stretch, encouraging visitors to finish their task quickly and return upstairs. The inn itself continues to serve its community, its history rooted in hospitality and routine. Nothing in the public rooms suggests anything unusual. Guests drink, talk, and leave without incident. But below their feet, some believe Harry remains. Not to frighten, not to disturb, but simply to be present, guarding a space that no longer belongs to the living alone. And as we step back into the light of the street, our journey continues toward a hotel where the activity is said to be far less restrained and where mischief, rather than memory, shapes what comes next. Buccleuch Arms, Hotel St. Boswell's. Standing on the green at St. Boswell's, the Buccleuch Arms Hotel has served travelers for generations. Its position facing open space and bordered by quiet roads gives it an air of calm respectability. Yet behind its doors, stories have circulated for decades of a presence that seems far less dignified and far more active. The ghost most often associated with the hotel is known simply as Peter. Unlike many apparitions tied to grief or tragedy, Peter is remembered for behavior described as mischievous, even disruptive. According to local tradition, he was the last man hanged in Jedburgh during the 1950s, though no official record has conclusively linked him to the hotel itself. Reports of Peter's activity focus largely on movement and interference. Objects are said to shift position without explanation. Items left neatly arranged are later found disturbed or missing only to reappear elsewhere. Glasses have been heard rattling, and small items have been known to fall from shelves with no visible cause. Footsteps are another frequent feature. Staff have described hearing quick, light steps moving through corridors and stairwells when no one else is present. These sounds often stop abruptly, as though whoever made them has paused to listen. In some cases, doors have been found open after being securely closed only moments earlier. What distinguishes Peter's presence from others in the borders is the lack of malice attributed to him. Witnesses rarely describe fear. Instead, they speak of irritation, confusion, and an odd sense of being toyed with. The activity feels deliberate, as though intended to attract attention rather than cause harm. One particularly unsettling detail involves sudden brief drops in temperature, usually occurring at the same time as movement or sound. These cold patches are localized and short-lived, vanishing almost as quickly as they appear. Skeptics suggest that hotels, especially older ones, provide perfect conditions for such reports. Heating systems cycle unpredictably. Sounds travel easily through shared spaces. Expectation plays a powerful role when stories are well known. These explanations are reasonable, and the hotel does not promote its reputation. Yet the consistency of accounts shared by staff and guests across many years has ensured Peter's story persists. The activity does not escalate, nor does it fade. It simply continues quietly asserting itself in small, disruptive ways. The Buccleuch Arms Hotel remains open and welcoming its role unchanged. Visitors arrive, rest, and depart without incident. But for those who stay long enough, particularly during quiet hours, the sense lingers that someone else enjoys making their presence known. And as we leave St. Boswell's behind, our journey turns toward one of the most notorious ruins in the Borders, where legend, cruelty, and supernatural fear converge within thick stone walls. Hermitage Castle. Isolated deep within Liddesdale, Hermitage Castle rises from the landscape with an air of bleak authority. Often described as the most haunted castle in Scotland, its remote position and brutal history have combined to create a reputation that feels almost unavoidable. This is not a place softened by time. It remains stark, severe, and deeply unsettling. The figure most closely associated with Hermitage Castle is William Solis, a nobleman remembered in legend as a warlock of extraordinary cruelty. Folklore claims that Solis practiced dark rituals within the castle, abducting and murdering children in acts so horrific that the local population appealed directly to the king for intervention. According to tradition, Solis could not be killed by ordinary means. His execution was said to involve being wrapped in lead and boiled alive in a cauldron until nothing remained. Since then, his presence is believed to linger within the walls. Visitors have reported hearing cries echoing through the ruins, often described as the voices of children, faint but piercing, rising suddenly before fading into silence. These sounds are most often heard when the castle is empty, leaving no easy explanation. Another spirit said to reside here is Sir Alexander Ramsay, who was imprisoned in the castle's dungeon during the 14th century and left to starve. His presence is often associated with the lower chambers, where sudden coldness and a sense of suffocation have been reported. Hermitage Castle is also linked to Mary, Queen of Scots, who stayed here briefly in the 16th century. Some claim to have seen a female figure moving through the upper areas of the ruin, her appearance fleeting and distant, as though belonging to another layer of time. Adding further complexity is the figure known as Robin Redcap, sometimes described as a court jester or malevolent spirit. He is said to wear blood-stained garments and to appear unexpectedly within the castle, vanishing just as quickly. Other reports include shadowy figures flitting through the upper stories, apparitions seen in windows where no floor exists, and shapes in armor standing motionless in the darkness. Skeptics argue that Hermitage Castle's isolation, violent history, and exposed structure invite imagination. Wind funnels through broken stone. Sound carries unnaturally. Darkness alters perception. These explanations are reasonable, yet they do little to dispel the overwhelming atmosphere reported by visitors. Hermitage Castle stands open to the elements, its walls stripped bare. But within its silence, many believe cruelty, fear, and unfinished memory still linger, refusing to fade with the daylight. And as we leave this bleak stronghold behind, our journey leads us toward a quieter ruin, where tragedy took a single life, and legend ensured it would never be forgotten. Crosskirk Peebles Set back from the road in Peebles, the ruined remains of Crosskirk stand quietly, easily overlooked by those who pass nearby. Once a friary later reduced to fragments of stone and earth, the site now serves as a burial ground. It is here, among uneven graves and broken walls, that one of the border's most enduring legends continues to surface. According to local tradition, Crosskirk is haunted by a female figure whose death is tied directly to the ruin itself. The story tells of a woman who fell from the tower, whether by accident or desperation, remains unclear. What is certain, in legend at least, is that her death was sudden and her story unfinished. Witnesses over the years have reported seeing a woman moving slowly among the graves, her form pale against the darkened stone. She is often described as appearing briefly standing still, as though listening before fading back into shadow. Her presence is usually silent, marked more by atmosphere than movement. Some accounts place her near the remains of the tower, where a sudden drop in temperature has been felt even on warm evenings. Others describe a heavy stillness settling over the burial ground, as though sound itself has been dampened. Footsteps have been heard behind visitors, walking alone, stopping abruptly when they turn. What unsettles many is the sense of isolation that accompanies these experiences. Crosskirk is not hidden yet. When activity occurs, the surrounding world seems to fall away. Time appears to slow. Distance becomes uncertain. Several witnesses have reported leaving the site more quickly than intended, without fully understanding why. Skeptics point to natural explanations. Ruined structures funnel wind unpredictably. Uneven ground alters sound. Low light and expectation can shape perception, particularly in places associated with death. These explanations are sensible, and no official record supports the legend beyond oral tradition. Yet even visitors unfamiliar with the story often remark on the atmosphere at Crosskirk. The burial ground feels attentive, rather than abandoned, as though it remembers something specific. The silence carries weight, not emptiness. Crosskirk remains open, unmarked by warning or explanation. People walk past daily, unaware of the stories bound to its stones. But as evening settles and shadows stretch across the graves, some believe a woman still walks here, bound not by malice, but by the moment she never escaped. And as we leave this quiet ruin behind, our journey turns toward a hotel where the presence is far less subtle, lingering near cellars and corridors with a familiarity that has earned it a name of its own. The Tontine Hotel, Peebles. Standing on the high street in Peebles, the Tontine Hotel has welcomed travelers for centuries. Its position at the heart of the town gives it an air of familiarity and routine. Yet behind its polished facade and quiet corridors, one presence is said to linger with such regularity that it has been given a name. The phantom associated with the Tontine Hotel is known as Dougie. Unlike many ghostly figures tied to specific tragedies or dramatic events, Dougie's story is defined more by repetition than explanation. He is most often encountered near the wine cellar, an area where staff and guests alike have reported unexplained activity. Sightings of Dougie usually involve a male figure glimpsed briefly at the edge of vision. He is described as solid, rather than misty, often mistaken at first for a member of staff. Only when approached does something feel wrong. The figure vanishes without sound, leaving behind a sudden awareness that no one else is present. Other experiences linked to the cellar include footsteps moving deliberately across stone floors, stopping abruptly when followed. Doors are said to open or close quietly on their own, without the sudden force often associated with drafts. On occasion, lights have been reported flickering or behaving unpredictably, though no fault has ever been confirmed. What unsettles many witnesses is the familiarity of the presence. Dougie is not described as threatening or aggressive. Instead, his activity feels habitual, as though he is continuing tasks long after they should have ended. The atmosphere near the cellar is often described as watchful rather than hostile. Skeptics suggest practical explanations. Old hotels are full of hidden spaces. Sound travels easily through thick stone walls. Expectation can shape perception, especially when a story is well known. These explanations are reasonable, and the hotel itself does not promote its reputation. Yet the consistency of accounts across different witnesses and decades has ensured Dougie's story endures. The same locations are mentioned repeatedly, the same sensations described with striking similarity. For many, it is this pattern that proves hardest to dismiss. The Tontine Hotel continues to operate, as it always has its role unchanged. Guests arrive, settle in, and sleep without incident. But for those who linger near the cellar, particularly during quiet hours, the sense remains that someone else knows the building just as well. And with that final presence lingering in the background, our journey through the haunted places of the Scottish borders comes to an end. The roads grow quiet, the stories settle back into stone and shadow, and the borders return to their calm exterior. Yet, as with all such places, the question remains whether these accounts are echoes of memory or something still moving unseen. The borders remind us that history does not always fade politely. Sometimes it simply waits. These stories remind us that ghost legends grow from history and human memory. Whether fact or folklore, they invite us to look closer at the past. Share your thoughts below and join Creepy Experience as we explore Britain's haunted heritage.